All right. Well, if there is no one else who would like to share a prayer, um, I would like to begin our little fireside chat. So that was good. Thank everyone for coming. I know today has nice weather. We're competing with the weather, but we had a good turnout so far. So this is wonderful. So we will feed the soul for the next hour or so, and we are lucky to have Mr. Adib Shafipour, a recent relocation to Austin from Houston. So we're glad you could upgrade. I'm just teasing you, but glad you could come. You can come here. Adib lives in a house with two other Baha'i youth. Right? How many are in that house? Are there three of you guys?
Four of us, but
Four of
one of
you.
them
Four.
is not Baha'i. Yeah. So
Okay.
he's like a friend of the faith.
Excellent,
Yeah,
excellent.
yeah.
So four dudes living in a house in the early 20s. It sounds like a blast. I'm sure it
For
is. And
sure.
the time of social isolation, I admit I am kind of jealous of that. Right? You can have four guys just hanging out. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So Adib was just telling me a little bit about some of the work he's been doing recently. He is in, what is it? How I describe medical research or
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So he's in some interesting work, and he's like to be on the cutting edge of technology and science, and he is a deep guy. Um, and what is your educational background was in what was it again, Adib? Let me look it up.
I have so two double bachelors in economics and biotechnology, and then masters in geoscience.
There you go.
So
There
yeah,
you go.
just a little of everything, but
Fantastic.
that's not
So
really important. Let's
that's
just
not really
start.
important, but it means you spent a
That's not
lot of
important.
time reading and researching this sort of stuff, more so
Sure. Yeah.
than a lot of
Yeah.
us have. So we appreciate you being coming here
Yeah. Yeah.
and being willing to share some of this. So with that, Adib, we'll pass it over
Mm,
to you.
great. Hi, friends, Alapa. It's lovely to see all you. A lot of you I know. Some of you I haven't met before. So hopefully after this is over, we can go get a coffee or something at the Baha'i Center. Um, Here, I should share my screen, yeah? So today's talk will kind of be loosely about the Baha'i perspective on development. A lot of this work um, has been advanced really by the recent House of Justice member who sadly passed away, Farzam Arbab. He kind of pioneered this effort of global development and advancing sciences from a Baha'i perspective, and he's in our thoughts. And I think his memorial service is soon. I don't know the details of that, but I think at the end maybe it will be mentioned. So we can start right away. Yeah. The basis of our conceptual framework is that in our faith we have the choice to look at the society and see like what structures in the society are in need of reform, what structures of the society are just fundamentally broken, and what structures of the society need to be built upon that are existing, that already lend themselves to developing humankind in a way that is enduring and lasting. So this quote here kind of gives us our conceptual framework. Could I ask someone to read it for us? I'm trying to be as interactive as possible in this.
Sure. In order to advance the common good, individuals must possess both the capacity to assess the strengths and weaknesses of existing social structures and the freedom to choose between participating in those structures, working to reform them, or endeavoring to build new ones. Baha'i International Community Representative's Office.
So this was actually part of a paper that was written and read at the United Nations on behalf of the Baha'i International Community. And it kind of gives us a framework of which the Baha'i approach to development, how we want to engage in bettering the world. And I think a big point that maybe isn't mentioned on the slide is that our goal is not to proselytize people. It's not to convert people. The work of our development is not merely for the expansion of our faith. It's for the betterment of humankind. And as a result of that, if friends wish to join in our religion, that is a secondary endeavor. specifically in this avenue. So there's more direct teaching, and then there's development of the structures of society that are more for the betterment of the world, purely for that sake, because that is what Baha'u'llah asks to do of us. So in our next slide, it talks about how in our faith we have like a history of needing to change the social order. We have Baha'u'llah and Shoghi Effendi and Abdul Baha have written many writings on how broken the social order is and how it needs to be reformed and the need of it to grow and change. So in this talk, I'll be kind of talking about it. This will be the last quote before I kind of get into it more, formally. Could someone read it for me? Or read it for us?
Sure, I'll do it. How long will humanity persist in its waywardness? How long will injustice continue? How long is chaos and confusion to reign amongst men? How long will discord agitate the face of society? The winds of despair are, alas, blowing from every direction, and the strife that divides and afflicts the human race is daily increasing. The signs of impending convulsions and chaos can now be discerned, inasmuch as the prevailing order appears to be lamentably defective.
Thank you so much. So this kind of gives us a background on kind of our approach to development and the need for development. So some people are, in this society are frankly happy with the way that the social order is structured. And so this gives us a lens to which we can apply our beliefs, our values to development of the world. So now I'm going to kind of loosely talk about some modern conceptions of development. So if we look at the way that modern development is organized, there seems to be like a emphasis put on these 6 things. So urbanization is a thing that in the past and even now has a lot of debate about it. Is it rational for society to aggregate large scores and scores of people to smaller and smaller spaces, and that most of the equity and money in the world is centered in these cities and places? Is it justified and is it valuable? That's one modern conception that we might be talking about today. Population management is also a pretty common conception of development, that, oh, we frankly have too many people in the world. If we just had less people, then the society would be more just and equitable. And we'll talk about this. Socio-economic safety nets. So like there's many common conceptions that like, oh, we care. Do we care for the poorest in the society? Do we care for the most vulnerable in society? Is there some sort of social safety net that prevents people from extreme poverty? Is there a way in which, so even if our own country, do we have safety nets? What are they? And are they beneficial to us? What is the Baha'i take on it? Another would be entrepreneurial incentives. So if we give, money and equity and wealth to the, masses of society, will there be an economy that allows us to equitably distribute resources? So what is the incentive for that? What is the goal of that? Another that maybe is more kind of my area would be agricultural innovation. So in the field of biotechnology, since climate change is upon us, and there's a great deal of, I think even in recent talks in this fireside, there have been many appeals to how climate change is affecting the world, and in what ways are we overcoming that with our agricultural innovation? Because our farmland seems to be dissipating more and more, but there's actually many interesting Baha'i insights written by Abdul Baha and Shoghi Effendi on this specific topic, and we'll kind of talk about them a little bit later today. And then scientific development. In what ways can science advance to help humanity? In what ways are they helping humanity? In what ways are they maybe not beneficial? So all of these things will be kind of touched upon in this talk today. So the first thing we're going to talk about is urbanization. So in modern development, it seems like urbanization early on was kind of the path to developing a nation. So how a nation would develop equity would be to create cities or create urban centers that allowed them to congregate wealth and create products for the masses of the country to be able to grow and develop. So this is another statement by the Baha'i international community to the UN. If I could get anyone to read it.
can read it. Progress in this direction will require conceptions of life in rural and urban settings to be thoroughly reimagined, drawing on the accumulated knowledge of the past, the scientific advances of the present, and a compelling vision of the future.
And so later in that talk, they talked about how, or in this presentation to the UN, the Baha'i international community talked about how developments can't simply be aggregating more and more of mankind into cities, because this will not be a way that is conducive to developing the majority of the world. A majority of the world that is, rife with poverty, illiteracy, things like this. And there has been in recent years a drive towards cities. So this creates problems of not only space, but problems of opportunity. There is not enough work for people to do when the mass of humanity is centered in cities. So, and even, as from a Baha'i perspective, that our work is our worship. So it is, ennobling to someone to not be able to work for their food. And it is incumbent upon us to, provide that opportunity for people to work. This is for people I'm sorry, there's like going to be a lot of graphs in here to kind of show us an analysis of how the world grows. So if you're allergic to graphs, I apologize. This kind of shows us how the takeoff of urbanization has caused a massive growth in population. So now when we look at the graph, it seems like after 1950, there was a massive growth in the population that kind of was set on by, the Industrial Revolution that allowed us to have more and more people. Less and less people were concerned with agriculture. More and more people were looking at, how to live in a more congregated place. So in this quote, it talks about how right now we're at a certain fertility level, that if we maintain this fertility level, within 100 years, we will have 24 billion people on Earth. So if we just maintain the current rate of people that are being, born and dying at this rate, then by 100 years, we'll have 24 billion people. So a lot of people have claimed that this is not sustainable, and surely it's not sustainable to have that many people on Earth, because we don't have a structure or system which allows us to care adequately for people in this number. So in the development conversation, it seems to be like, there's always a debate between this dichotomy of, we need to, reduce or have population controls, much like in China, they had the one-child policy, or we need to allow people to, have more access to resources that, give them birth control. This debate seems to be a very common discourse in development. So here I want to talk about socioeconomic safety nets. This is another big debate in development. So today there's 2.5 billion people covered by some safety net program. That is a large percentage of the world. So if you have Social Security, there's some basic income guarantees that are very prevalent in Europe and now getting prominence in America. Any type of social insurance, welfare, this is what would be considered a social safety net. And so the modern discourse of development in this area seems to be that we have to take care of the poorest among us, which is a very noble ideal, and it costs a lot. So some of the talk in development is that these things are hindrances to the progress of the people, right? So if we just give people, money, if we just give people, don't allow them to work for what they have, then how will they be able to contribute to the society? So that is also a very common discourse in development. So when we increase the capacities of individuals and communities to build more just and equitable social structures, requires a conception of social development that avoids these extremes. So how can we create a social safety net that allows us to not only, care for the poorest among us or the most vulnerable among us, but allows them to contribute to society in a way that is beneficial to them? society.
What?
What was that? Okay, we'll keep going, I guess. In here we have graphs about entrepreneurial incentives. So some modern concepts of this include, like, group economics, microloans, and family-based businesses. So a lot of modern development thinking will, talk about how the whole process of, expansion in the modern sector yields a increase of income in the hands who save. So should we give, incentives to people to create their own equity, or should we allow, a very few people to control the economic structure of the society so that they can allow the wealth to be, they won't save as much. So when you and I have money, we're more prone to save. Yeah. If we don't have a business, we're less likely to take risks, and we're then less likely to put that money back into the society as the economic order is currently structured. But when we look at the way that the society functions now, is it more productive to have, buy things that are built within our own communities, within our own neighborhoods? Is it productive to give loans to people that we know, so that if they wish to start a business, or if they wish to do something that benefits their community, that they can have that capital to be able to then give back to the community in that way? So a lot of the modern talk about this is that should we kind of maintain an order that allows us to maybe give money within our certain economic interests. So group economics would be something like, we all have a certain economic interest, right? We all want Austin to be prosperous, yeah? So should we buy businesses that are made in Austin, or should we go and buy businesses that benefit some other community? Something like that. Microloan would be something like, specifically this is more common in, Eastern countries, that currently families and women don't have access to money or capital to be able to start businesses. So when that money, when those tools are given, it gives us more opportunity to be able to grow areas in which, money is just being dumped to give charity. Is it useful to give to charity, or is it useful to allow for economic incentives for that community to grow itself? Is there any questions so far, or maybe I'm going too fast, or this is like, what are you talking about, dude?
Adib.
Your framing is very helpful, Adib. Thank you.
Also, do you know, like, has there been, I'm sure there has, but do you know of what's the general sense of the success of the microloans?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that is actually a huge debate in development. Like, so it seems like in the past 20 years, the number of microloan recipients has increased, and
Mommy,
the largest.
Austin, is this in Austin?
Yes. So, sorry, that was so cute.
It is cute.
Yeah. So yeah, so to answer your question, it seems like microloans are very prominent in Africa, and right now they are based on kind of prevalent statistics taken by Johns Hopkins. Like, it seems like microloans are the greatest resource that is given to people with not a lot of capital. So there's quite a bit of success in this avenue, that microloans are actually a very prominent way, specifically targeted to women in countries that maybe wouldn't have access to credit, or for cultural or religious reasons are not allowed to get loans from banks without the permission of their husband or things like that. It allows them to be able to acquire capital to then start businesses that benefit their community. And so they found that specifically when you target women that want to build businesses, they are more likely to keep that money within the community, because it seems like, I guess, women are just better in every way, frankly, in these avenues. Like, it seems that when you allow women to have access to credit that they otherwise wouldn't, it builds the society in a way that benefits all people. And when the converse is given to men, it's about 50-50. You sometimes see success because men are more prone to take risks. Men are more, based on the research, men, they've concluded that men are more riskier in terms of return on investment. And I hope that's kind of helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So like, I apologize. So based on these spaces, like, it seems like our a Baha'i perspective of this would be very hard to discern, because it seems like you have to have a great level of understanding of how, economics works, of how the social structure is oriented, to be able to discern whether what we are to do in this avenue, whether we are to keep this structure, whether we're to improve upon this structure, or whether we're to change the structure, or whether we're just supposed to completely ignore this structure and build our own. So it seems like each of these things gives us some food for thought to be able to discern like which one of these three we should do, because this is our conceptual framework of how we have to engage in a society and how we have to better the world. Each of these things have their own level of prominence in the society, and how we interact with them has to be very measured. And it's always good to go to guidance and to go to the writings to try and find or discern any approach to take that would be best. So the next thing I want to talk about is actually quite dear to my heart. This is agricultural innovations in the last 10, 20 years. So there is an intrinsic problem in this area. So we'll talk later, we'll talk a little more about Abdul Baha's take on the role of the farmer in society. But right now we can talk about kind of the problems in agriculture. Firstly, there is 33% of the world's food quality producing land has been lost. So that is actually quite a shocking and startling revelation, that a third of our farmland that we use to produce food for the society is depleted of its nutrients to produce adequate crops. So, and before it was only about 2 or 3% of the world's land was allocated for farming. Now it's 1%, 1.5%, which is quite startling, in fact. So recently, in the last 10 years, science have begun to genetically engineer crops that require less water and grow more plentiful food. It's a very big debate now, and it would be maybe another hour to get into it. But like, I know you guys have seen GMOs, like the debate between if they're effective, if they're safe, if they're ethical, is a very big. It's a very big debate in development, as well as in agricultural production. Sorry about that. So another advancement in the last like 5 years has been now that I think everyone is kind of aware that the bees are dying, and everyone loves bees. Bees are important, right? They give us honey, but not only that, they pollinate our crops. Yeah, so it seems like the most bridging issue in the US today is that everyone loves bees. We should save bees. They're very important to the agriculture. So now they're beginning to use drones to allow little machines to pollinate crops rather than bees, because as climate change carries forth, the bees are dying. So they will not be able to pollinate the crops in the farmland, and it will cause a reduction in the production of that food, which is quite startling, actually. And then, more advanced technology in soil drilling. So before, when it would take maybe 20, 40, 50 people to farm an acre, now it only takes one person in a soil drill. So I don't know if you guys have seen those machines where they kind of sit on them and they're very wide and green, and they kind of drill the soil to be able to harvest the crops. Those things are advances in technology that create less and less need for us to have more and more people involved in agriculture. So some of these things are good, others are, they're debatable, and let's not get into whether GMOs are healthy or not. That seems like a very divisive thing, but this is currently what's happening. So whether we agree with it or not, like, this is the current thinking
Oh
about
man.
how development works. Yeah. So now I want to talk about something that I came across that was quite enlightening to me. And if I could get particularly like maybe a youth or a child to read it, it would be nice.
Ayana, are you still there?
If not, it's okay. If you're too shy, I understand. I didn't like talking in front of people too. Okay, then anyone can read it. Oh, she's coming back. Ayana, do you want to read this for us?
Role of the farmer in society. The question of economics must commence with the farmer and then be extended to the other classes, inasmuch as the number of farmers is far greater than all the other classes. Therefore, it is fitting to begin with the farmer in matters related to economics, for the farmer is the most active agent in human society. In brief, from among the wise men in every village, a board should be set up, and the affairs of that village should be under control of that board. Extract from a tablet of Abdul Baha.
So we see in this quote that the way that we produce food is very important to the way that the society is structured. And so I think, not to interpret writings or anything, but it seems that there is a great deal of importance placed on the role of the farmer in our society. And in an economic, world that maybe is more a mirror of the revelation, it would be quite different to see that farmers are being, elevated and revered in the society to allow us to really honor and respect them because they make our food, and it is important to support their endeavors in as much as they provide for us and provide really for the world to be able to eat. So I just thought I would share that because I found it quite interesting to think about, how a future economic landscape would be built, whereas now most of the wealth and most of the economic life is centered in cities. It seems like the implications of this would be that the farmer would be the basis of our economic system. Agriculture would be something that we all take part in, something that we all benefit from, and something that we all contribute to.
There's a couple of things that come to mind reading that quote. Working in Manhattan is seeing the benefits of gardens on rooftops or in blank spaces, and how it brings the community together, growing their own vegetables and their own what they need, and they collaborate about what they need. So there's something that's very holy and hallowed and uplifting and nutritional. I think back to the GMO, speaking from a moderate point of view, is I love the hydroponics that you're showing there. That it goes back to this quote, truthfulness is the foundation of all human virtues. Because it's been pharmaceutically driven and Monsanto driven, we simply are asking for transparency. So how does the farmer's holy role, this station, supported through transparency? Thank you, Adib.
Yeah. So, sorry, something I forgot to mention that kind of Aniela reminded me of is that these are a hydroponic farm. So approach to agriculture in very urban areas has been to create spaces where agriculture can flourish in a way that is suitable in cities. So in cities, you can't use a lot of land to, plow or to, harvest soil or to do anything like that. You can't use the ground because the soil is essentially useless as far as its nutrients. So one solution they've come up with is to create hydroponic plants, which allows, soil and water to be embedded in these kind of strips that allows crops and grass and different type of fruits and, crops to grow, which has had some success in the last 10 years. Yeah. So I thought I would mention a case study. So this case study is called the Green Revolution. So particularly in the 1950s and 1960s, there was a very prominent economic theory that, if we only gave the benefits of technology to kind of more rural areas, to less populated areas, it would allow the development of the society. And so when this idea was brought forth by kind of Nobel Prize winning economists and different, different development thinkers within the UN and different organizations that kind of try to impose this ideology on, the scores of the people, it saw that there was a fundamental problem in the way that the world was kind of farming its land. One was that countries with the most people, countries that have large populations, had to import their grain, had to import their crops to be able to feed their people. So an example would be India or China. So countries like this they wouldn't be able to have enough grains or crops to be able to grow food to feed their people. So they had to import grains and were not able to be self-sufficient. So this caused them to be dependent on others to bring their, crops to India. And then this made the price of those goods go up because they were quite needed, right? So unfortunately, that's how our economy works. If you need something very greatly and people know you are going to buy it regardless of the price goes up. So this is actually quite a sad thing about the way that our economic system is structured. But that's what was the case. So a way to combat this was that we were like, the way that development was going to ensue, the way that resources were going to be given was that these benefits were going to be given to rural areas. So, but what they found was, even though that the price of food has stabilized and a lot more of the people of the world have more access to equity and money to be able to buy resources for their land, the agricultural benefits of the revolution were being reaped chiefly by farmers with larger holdings and more money. So even if you give people access to tools, even if you give people access to resources, there's still, even with that, there's still things missing. So farmers that had more education, farmers that had more land, were reaping the mass of those benefits. And so it would be better to be able to create a structure that allows us to empower people to be able to take advantage of those resources. So it seems like giving people resources is not the way that we can develop the world. There has to be something more. So do you know that old saying that if you give a man a fish, he will, eat for a day. If you teach him how to fish, he will, that seems like a learning that was made within this, case study. It seems like not only giving him the fishing pole, you can't just give him the fishing pole and expect him to teach himself how to fish. You have to teach people, or allow to grow people, empower people to be able to use the tools that are available to them. And so coupled with this, there has been particularly things that I'm working on now, and like kind of more advances in sciences, is like genomic editing, which has many different implications, like on humans, on animals, or more, kind of the more milk toast one is like kind of on medicines, which is most people have no problem with if you genomically edit a medicine versus if you edit a fetus or something like that. This is a very big debate in the development thinking. Like, should we, is it just, is it okay, is it fair to be able to change the way that the human being is made. There's RNA sequencing, penicillin, nuclear fusion. These are the advances in science since the post-war era of World War II, and they've caused the change in the way of life of most people. Like, we would not be sitting here now were it not for the transistor being made and radars being made. Like, it wouldn't have happened. So there's benefits surely to all these scientific developments, and there's also great harm being done by a lot of them, and the way in which we use them is quite a difficult thing to discern. So I just wanted to kind of talk about how we have now profound changes that suggest that we have new models of life, and so this is a far-reaching thing to be able to discern these things. Right, actually, I should probably give time for questions before I keep going on. Is there any questions or?
Adib, I have a question. This is Khotan. Can you speak more to this slide? This is where your work centers around, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Could you speak to this, because Abdul Baha is so clear about knowledge and scientific discoveries could go either, they could be satanic or they could be heavenly, his words. Help us understand. So anything that has the focus and the intention of materialism clearly is going to go down one path. Anything that has spiritual intentions goes in another. But what's the role of spirituality within scientific development as you understand it?
Thank you. That's a great question. It seems like spirituality should be the basis of the way that we develop our science, right? So Abdul Baha even says that science is the noblest of all virtues, right? So when we do something, scientists are human beings, right? They think, very logically, they think rationally, empirically. They don't give much dwelling to feeling or to, within their work. So it seems like when we do something, we want to assess the usefulness of it beforehand, but oftentimes it's very hard to assess the usefulness of something that's discovered by accident, right? So most of the things in science are purely accidental. Like, there was no need. So even the photon was discovered by accident. The thing that creates laser beams, the thing that's the reason you have TVs and computers, like, that was a complete accident. So where it goes is based on the tinkering and innovation and ideas of people who just are playing with things that kind of gets out of their control. So even Oppenheimer, who created the nuclear bomb, didn't even know that's what he was creating. That's just what he was given money for. So it seems like now that we have a greater understanding of these things, it's incumbent upon us as a society to kind of look at them and see what their merit is. So is something like editing of genes, is that a just thing? Is that a thing that benefits the society? And is something like penicillin useful? So the next, so what can we do on an individual level? That's a really good question. So I think one thing we can do on an individual level is to, one, be informed. That's, I think, the greatest thing we can do. It's very hard to critique something which you don't understand. If we understand how these things work, it allows us to be able to analyze them in a way that gives us like the latitude to talk about them to people and kind of discuss their merits. I think another thing we can do is be very keenly aware of how these scientific advancements play in the society. So I wouldn't say, be for GMOs, be against GMOs, but read about them, understand about them. Or I wouldn't say, be against genetic editing or be for genetic editing. Look at the way that they're used and analyze that on a case by case. It's very easy to fall into dichotomies of this is wrong and this is right. When oftentimes it's way more muddy than that. So to Khotan's question and also to Vanessa's question, it seems like what we can do on an individual level and how we approach science could kind of be the same. So if we are in a space where we're discussing the merits of a technology, if we're in a space where we're examining the usefulness of a product or the usefulness or the efficacy of something that's been discovered, it's incumbent upon us to learn as much about it as we can. And then,
may I add one thing, is that these can't be monetized then. It can't be agenda driven. This is the problem with, again, this holy station of science.
I agree. Yeah, it's oftentimes the problem comes from when we try to monetize it, when we try to gain from it economically or materially. So I think when we're critiquing these things, or when we see that there's issues with the coherence of the technology, it's best not to attack the people doing it, because then they become defensive. Like, scientists are human beings too. As much as we claim to, be objective and be rational, like, we have feelings. Like, if you attack some work that someone has been doing for the past 20 years, naturally they're going to be defensive about it. Yeah. So it's best to not attack the individual, or not to critique the individual that's doing the work, but to critique the way that the operation of that work, like how that work is being used in the society. And so then it's more open to being a conversation about what is the efficacy of it, rather than, oh, I don't like what you're doing is wrong, and then it becomes a debate rather than a conversation.
So I have a question, Adib, as a follow-up. Are there publications, websites, blogs that you would recommend that we can consult, read, follow to educate ourselves more? What would you recommend?
So I'm a big proponent of the PBS. So PBS actually has it's his public broadcasting service. It's paid for by you and everyone. It's like a public funded institution. And they have actually some great research on science, the efficacy of it, how it's being used. Oftentimes, if you go to one website or the other, it's very much like, we're for this, we're against this, and it's very hard to discern between those two, extremes. So I'm a very big proponent of us being able to use public services to be able to inform ourselves. Another good resource is, I think, National Geographic has been a pretty big, institution in America. Specifically, they have quite a good amount of articles, not just on geography and geology, but kind of now they're kind of branching out into everything. That's another good resource to kind of be at least informally informed, if that makes sense, on kind of the recent developments in science. So from my experience, other publications usually have like a bent, or like a, leaning to a liberal side or conservative side, or they're for this or they're against this. It's very hard to kind of see which one to take.
So I had a question. Should we all be making our own, like, gardens? I tried to make a garden in April. Well, I mean, I've gardened before, but I realized quite quickly that it was not going to sustain my vegetable needs. And more so my depression age grandfather, the one he made, like a victory garden style. But I did join last night on, it was like, I don't even know, I think it's called permaculture, where it's called yards, food yards. I don't think my husband's going to be on board, but we'll see.
Yeah, so the biggest thing I would suggest, this is a great way to know your neighbors. So in our junior youth group in Houston, having a garden, having a community garden was the greatest thing that we did as a service project. So you can't do it on your own. It's not going to happen. I don't mean to be mean or tell you that you can't do something, but no, you have to get your neighbors, you have to get people in your community to care about it, because then it's not just I'm doing it for myself, it's the community is doing it for themselves. So this is a great way to get to know your neighbors. If you have land in your yard, if you have suggesting or inviting your neighbors to make a garden that everyone can share from, is one of the greatest ways to get in contact with your neighbors. So I would suggest that if you want to do that, if you feel like that's something that you can handle, or something you can muster, to go ask the front yard or the front lawn, anything. Go and ask them if they want to farm it, and make your front yard like a garden, if that's something that you think could be beneficial to the community. Because if it's just you, then it's like one day you forget, one day you're busy, one day something happens, you don't water the plants, they're gonna go away, and then no one is there to help you, and you feel sad, and you feel like it's too much, things like that. But when it's a community endeavor, it allows us to not only, one, get to know our neighbors better, but two, it's a community owned thing. Now it's not just you, we're walking together. Yeah. And also it's a great way to start a devotional as well. Is there anything else?
So if you start a devotion connected to a community garden, do you only use quotes that mention plants and trees?
That is advisable, but not required. Yeah, I think we're approaching the end. Oh, this is there's a couple more slides and then we can wrap up, and then we can go for questions or anything that's on your mind. I don't have the answers to everything, and I probably don't know anything. So if I don't know, I'll try to figure it out. But if I could get someone to read this quote, that would be great.
The broad range of current activities spans efforts from villages and neighborhoods to regions and nations, addressing an array of challenges, including education from preschool to university, literacy, health, the environment, support for refugees, advancement of women, empowerment of junior youth, elimination of racial prejudice, agriculture, local economies, and village development. The society building of Baha'u'llah's cause has begun to be more systematically expressed in the collective life of the Friends as a result of the acceleration of the process of expansion and consolidation, especially in advanced clusters. Beyond this, of course, countless believers, through their professional and voluntary efforts, contribute their energies and insights to projects and organizations established for the common good. Universal House of Justice from 2018.
Do we have any comments about this or questions or insights? I would love to hear you guys' thoughts on this. Whoops. No? Okay.
No, I'm just very struck, I'm sorry, by the society building power of Baha'u'llah's cause. It's just such a remarkable thing. It sounds to me that anything that we want to do for our community, economic development, societal development, development in general, that needs to be the bedrock of it. And if we come from that, then we can begin to figure out what's working, what's not working, what needs to change, what needs to be adapted, adjusted, and what needs to completely be replaced. I think that will help us to be the measuring component of that. Adib, is that what you're thinking by sharing this?
Yes, so I think the basis of our understanding is that one is the Baha'i approach to development is in its infancy. So I share this one to kind of, before reading this, I had no idea that we were even involved in development. That's not the first thing. The second thing was, if you weren't unaware, now you're aware that the faith is quite actively engaged in developing the world in a way that doesn't try to proselytize or convert people. And the second thing is that we often see that our institutions, even just our regular institutions like our LSA or anything like that, they're in their infancy now. So to be critical of them or to be hypercritical of them when they're also learning too is kind of counterproductive. So if we want to be able to engage in this development of the society, we have to start here at home. We can't be inward looking. We can't look to ourselves. We can't mirror the religions of the past. This is kind of a new avenue that we're kind of breaking out into. And so while we have to respect the way that the society functions now, there is means for us to learn more about things that kind of are groundbreaking. And so I would encourage us to kind of be uncomfortable. Don't get in a comfort zone. Do something that's outside of your your realm and try to grow in that way. That way you can develop new abilities, new capacities to be able to do things that benefit your community.
Hi.
Just looking, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, hi there. This is Karen, and I'm of Austin Baha'i. So welcome to our community. And I just wanted to mention, I don't know, or bring something up that I was a Peace Corps volunteer back in the 90s, and also was called Crisis Corps at that time. So I basically did Peace Corps kind of twice. And you know, I haven't really found any other Baha'is, I'm sure there are some out there, that have been in Peace Corps. But for me, I found it, you know, I mean, I was doing development work, you know, in the middle of nowhere. And it was, you said, you know, the Baha'is' efforts are kind of in their nascent stage. But I really, I don't know, personally would like to encourage Baha'i youth to consider, if you want to do development work, you know, learn what's going on out there. And I highly recommend the Peace Corps. I mean, it certainly changed my life. I was a Baha'i before I went into it, but it just reinforced, you know, my Baha'i beliefs and principles and understanding of what needs to happen for a new world order. And so I'd like to encourage Baha'i youth to join in those development efforts. I know they're not Baha'i development efforts specifically, but you can, one way we can change development efforts, I think, is to become an insider and changing it from the inside, to join it and be a part of that. You know, the way I work with my community, I tried to bring about, you know, consultation and Baha'i principles to the development work that the US government was doing essentially, but I had really broad latitude to make development my own, you know, and to bring Baha'i principles into that development work. So I guess I encourage Baha'is to get out there, and, you know, there are structures that exist to do development work from you know, with Baha'i principles.
Yeah. Just to mention, actually now there's a lot of Baha'i institutions that are kind of working with the Peace Corps to be able to like kind of contribute to societies that, you know, the Peace Corps is operating in, to be a local version, as Vanessa is mentioning now. Yeah, like there is many local even branches of ways to help develop the society, even in our own community. So if youth are kind of like, oh, I don't want to go to, you know, some other country, I want to stay here, like there's even ways that this can be done.
Yeah, there's AmeriCorps, for example. I mean, there's
yeah.
Right now, unfortunately, with COVID, Peace Corps is suspended, but it's never too late to start as an option and start applying to those kinds of things.
Yeah, definitely.
That's really an important point, the suspension of these, you know, extraordinary ways we learned to hop in and help in other cultures and be taught, right? And I think that what is omnipresent right now is this tribal media conclave thinking, and, you know, what a cop-out we're seeing it be in our intellectual responsibilities to face the exigencies of the day, and to not be a part of this great coming together. I don't think history will judge us very kindly. So it's really this quote in front of us in 2018 is already preparing us for the possibility of our little village, our little neighborhoods, to come together in a way that Abdul Baha, you know, quietly did when he was planting crops before the World War. And I mean, I know that you are speaking about so many different avenues we can come to this particular quote by, but so much is broken down by working in these little villages called our neighborhoods, and empowering learning through the spaces that the House of Justice has outlaid for us. It is so difficult. It is so frightening for many of us, and yet and stifling. Yet it will break down this tribal conclave that does no longer suit humanity's ever advancing capacity for this great coming together. Adib, this was so helpful. I can't thank you enough for putting this together so succinctly. Would you answer, what are you working on if it's not top secret? What are you interested in right now in your particular bent?
So there's two things that I kind of try to focus my time on. One is the neighborhood, like the more active Baha'i, expansion and consolidation, having junior youth groups, having children's classes. Like that's one area of my life. And then another area of my life is I currently am working on kind of treatment options for those people who have expended all other treatment options, specifically for sarcoma. So the drug that we're developing right now, or the treatment that we're developing right now, is a way to give those people who have been told, like, no, you're going to, there's no other option for you, to give them another option of treatment. And the way that this is done, I guess I don't want to get too technical into it, but when you have a patient who has cancer, it's because the metabolic structure of their gene or of their cell is unable to die. So the reason why cancer is so deadly is because the cells that should be dying are not dying, and so the way that this is, kind of treated now is you give people essentially drugs that poison the growth of the cell, or that attack all the cells around that specific area. So they have ways now to attack a certain region of the body, and it kills all the cells in those areas. And so that's when people say they're in remission, it means that they currently have no cells which don't die. All their cells work, function properly. But when sometimes it comes back, is because that means of attacking cancer is not effective, because you're essentially giving people poison and hoping that it poisons the cancer cell and the normal cells not enough, but the cancer cells to be able to attack the function in the cell that allows them to not reproduce. Sorry, I'm trying to use like very like easy to understand words. What I'm focusing on right now is trying to create ETBs, or engineered toxin bodies, that doesn't affect the normal cells. So when the cancer cell is attacked, it only attacks the cancer cell. It only uses gene markers in those cancer cells that doesn't harm the health of the individual long term. Because sometimes when these treatments are made, that is given up. The long-term health of the individual is not stressed. It's only the short term, we have to get rid of this harmful thing. And if that causes problems later, it's okay, we'll deal with it later. This seems not to be a sustainable way to approach health, right? So our organization and my company kind of focuses on a more holistic approach to attacking, health in general, and specifically cancer. So it starts with diet, it starts with exercise, it starts with those preventative things. And then when that happens, it goes on to treatment options that don't include harming the individual purely for the monetary sake, or purely because it's easy or not time consuming. Because a lot of these treatments are available, they're just very time consuming and very expensive. I hope that answers your question. I hope that wasn't too jumbled.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this is the last slide, and I'll read this one. So our role is that every nation and every group, and indeed every individual, will contribute to the emergence of the world's civilization towards which humanity is irresistibly moving. And this was a letter to the Baha'is of Iran in 2013. So it's incumbent upon all of us to take part in this endeavor. And I just wanted to thank all of you for being here and welcoming me very warmly. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming here, Adib, and sharing with us. This is wonderful. So yeah, we still have a few minutes to talk. You had mentioned, things about like community gardens and that sort of thing. Something we've experimented with. I think Martha mentioned in the comments, talk about in a neighborhood with an HOA, you may not be able to have a garden in the front, which is a very interesting comment, because it made me reflect. Because first of all, her daughter, Martha's daughter, Rachel, and my wife are both attorneys. And one of the things they were both very vehement about was they wanted to live in a neighborhood without an HOA, right? And so now we live, houses right next to each other. They live right behind us. Right? We both love this neighborhood because it didn't have an HOA for precisely that reason, right? But it made me kind of reflecting on, as a society, what do we emphasize? What is most important? And if you reflect on HOAs, HOAs, a large part of their what they're geared towards is maximizing property value, right? So, they help neighborhoods stay nice. And, there's some safety issues as well that are there, but a lot of it is geared towards maximizing property value. Made me reflect a little bit and think about, well, what if we got involved in HOAs and started kind of changing that focus towards maximizing community building, right? What if you had HOAs that were focused on things like creating community gardens, that kind of thing? What would that look like, and how would that affect? And I suspect, ironically, in the long run, if we do that, they would have even more positive effect on property values in the long run. And it's just interesting to shift that focus, because my mother lives in a neighborhood that has a pretty strong HOA, right? And it's just kind of interesting to reflect on what are our priorities right now. And it looks like as time moves by, we should be shifting our priorities towards community building, sustainability, and that sort of thing. Seems like a real, just kind of inevitable growth that we should be going through. So I thought that was interesting. You mentioned that.
And I would say that this is what the youth need you for. Yeah, like we have a community that encourages youth very greatly to go and serve in a neighborhood, or to go have a junior youth group or have a children's class. And the adults are kind of just chilling in the back, like, oh, I'll pick up kids, oh, I'll bring food. Like, no, this is something that can be done, right? Involving yourself in the HOA so that these restrictions are not placed on the youth, or kind of encouraging, the bodies that work in your community or your neighborhood to be more open to the community building efforts that the youth are doing, if you're at that level of your community building. But yeah, one step at a time. Yeah.
Well, every step counts, doesn't it?
Yeah,
every step, every contribution. I would just call to our attention, it was released September 2020. It's compilation of extracts from the writings of Baha'u'llah and Abdul-Baha, letters of Shoghi Effendi and the Universal House of Justice about the world's current state of disorder and confusion. And it's a powerful document to study together. The thing that strikes me in the various spaces where we are studying this is that the one thing that we concentrate so much on is the disintegration rather than the construction. And that's what I think you brought to the forefront here, Adib. And the document brings so much hope for our activities, our spaces, and the development of the intellectual life of the communities that we are operating in, not just the Baha'i communities, but those spaces where we're inviting others to the table. Someone asked a question about how to put this in the chat. I have no idea. I don't know how to put the link because I've printed it out, and maybe Adib, you could do that. It's in our thread, because I do not know how to do that. And perhaps the Spiritual Assembly of Austin could send it out for the friends to study. Because who else has hope in their front pocket?
Anila, what's the title of it? Can you, on the printed?
It is called The World's Current State of Disorder and Confusion, and it was released September 2020.
Thank you.
Hey guys, one really great thing about sharing hard copy documents now with Zoom, with your laptops that have cameras, is you can put it on your laptop keyboard and then close the lid. It automatically scans it.
Oh.
I'm kidding.
Oh my God.
That's fantastic.
Oh my God, I totally felt
That's
that.
fake science. Fake science right there.
But it was joyful.
So good. So good.
I was just
Wouldn't that
about
be
to
nice?
do it.
Wouldn't it be nice if it worked like a scanner like that? That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I think you need to create that, Nabil June. Go, do it.
There you go. I'm on it. Adib, thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, that was pretty awesome.
Your PowerPoint presentation. A couple of people have asked me for the slides.
Okay,
do you mind if we, you shared the Google Slides with me. Do you mind if you just change the settings, the sharing settings, so that anyone with the link can view? And then I'll send those out. So
that would be great.
Fantastic.
And then it could be added to the Facebook
yes.
stream as well.
Yes. There we go.
That'd be great.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Yeah, Baha.
So much.
Thank you.
Very informative.
Thank you.